You're listening to a bonus episode of The Dairy Edge, featuring Teagasc's weekly Let's Talk Dairy webinar series, which is also available as a podcast.
My name is George Ramsbottom. I think you probably know me at this stage. And I'm joined this morning by a colleague of mine, Patrick Gowing. Patrick has particular expertise in the whole area. At least I hope he's particular expertise in the whole area of calf accommodation, because that's what he's on here to talk to us this morning about. And Pat, we're going to show you here a slide from a board that was prepared for the current series of CalfCare on-farm events. We're going to focus a little bit this morning on knowing your number. In other words, how many calves can you safely rear in a particular shed that you have on your farm? So I suppose just to put the whole thing in context, if you go back to 2010, in the month of February, there were 250,000 calves born on Irish dairy farms. And this February, I'd estimate it will be much closer to 800,000 calves born in the month of February. So with the knock-on effects of a large number of calves, a huge number of calves being born in an increasingly concentrated period, it's creating more and more of a pressure point on the accommodation on your farm. So Pat, maybe you bring us through some of the specs that are really important for safely rearing calves on Irish dairy farms.
Thanks, George. Thanks for the compliment there, and you took it away as quick. I suppose with everything over time, the herd sizes have increased. People got more land or stocked up. Maybe the milking powers extended, but usually the calf housing and the calving facilities tend to be one that just get sweated in the expansion phase. Yeah. And then over time they start to come to a point where they can do no more, but we keep stocking on the calves. And again, I suppose sometimes with calves, it's a bit like having children that you forget. You go through a season and you get out of it, and then the milk checks come and things are good, and you get into the back end of the year, and then it kicks off again. And sometimes we forget about the hardship we had in the previous year. Yeah. A lot of that hardship it's not the first calves that cause the problem. They move through the system relatively straightforward. It's the bunch that come in through February. So the early calves landed in January or early first week of February. If you think about it, they have huge amount of space because there's nothing else there. To get up and going fairly quick. But it's the load of calves that come as they keep coming and as the system starts to go under pressure. So The first thing I would say is it's space for a calf, George. I think when a calf has the space to lie, it just takes the pressure off the shed. And what we're recommending there is anywhere between 1.7 meters squared to 2 meters or 2.2 meters squared. So that's square meters. So I think one thing we could ask you to do is actually go measure your sheds.
Yeah.
And see. So like if you had a 4-span shed, that one with the other is 20 meters long, it's 6 meters wide. So that gets your square meters, and then you divide that by 2. I'd say the half annuals, I'd say divide by 2, just to give the rough number of calves you'll be able to keep in that shed. I do also think, George, that sometimes the smaller figure, what's happening now, probably one was the price of calves, one is the price of milk powder. Maybe down the line a bit of change in legislation. The calves may have to stay longer on your farm.
Okay.
So what you might have got away with before with a smaller type calf, maybe the lower end of the thing there, 1.6, 1.7 meters square, the calf. As the calf gets bigger, it needs more space. So you'll have a double whammy there, I suppose. Is you have more calves in the same area, but the calves are actually bigger.
Yeah.
So I think when you're doing your calculations, George, I'd work at a minimum of 2 meters squared per calf.
That's a nice round figure as well to work off. Tell us then, I think you were saying to me before this, Pat, that generally if you have enough floor space, you usually have enough airspace. There's a kind of criteria there in airspace.
Yeah, generally speaking, look, unless you go into a real old shed or a very low roof on it, it won't work. But again, when you need between 6 and 8 cubic meters per calf of airspace. But so as you give them more floor space, by default, you're giving them more airspace. And I think I think if it was one thing I would say from the webinar, you can just go in and create the floor space or make sure you have it. You'll go a long way to solving a lot of the problems. But if people want to calculate themselves, 6 to 8 cubic meters per calf. Yeah. So that's to do that. Then it's the length by the breadth by the average height of the shed, and that'll give you your cubic meters, and then divide by the calves in the shed.
Okay. And tell us then about the whole area then about air inlet and outlet. The air inlet seems to be twice the size or twice the area of the outlet. Why is that?
To get a lot of these things is to get movement of air through the shed, and I think sometimes there's if you go into a stale shed or a shed, or when if you open the door, you stand into it, there's a massive smell. It's usually the ammonia that you're smelling. And if you're smelling that, that means whatever pathogens are in the air are also being inhaled by the calf. So to help that, what we need is a movement of air for cool air to be coming in and hot air to be rising out, to clear out the shed and to leave for a better environment for the calves. So a closed down shed, again, you may get away with it in the earlier part of the year because the numbers of calves are very small. Might work, but as the pressure comes on and also as the days get milder and the heat builds in the shed, it becomes basically a perfect environment for pathogens to grow and survive, and it cause issues for calves. So for that, we need a movement. Sorry, George.
Yeah, I remember reading before that if you have ammonia in a house, it causes paralysis of the cilia in the windpipe. Yeah. So you get an accumulation rather than a kind of a flushing out of any bits of dirt and crud that go down into the calf's lungs. That's another reason.
So for ventilation in a shed, you need air to be pushed in to push up the hot air, and then the outlet to let it out. So you need and I think too, George, when you're standing in the shed, you should actually feel, I won't say a draft, but a movement of air. So a lot of people get worried about it. There's a movement of air around if you're standing in the shed. It's up at that point, that's good. That's because you're moving fresh air into the shed. What you don't want drafts is where the calves lying down. Now, if you take most calves and they're lying down, like it's very low to the ground, like so. Yeah, I think it's a different environment. I think there's a lot of people the sheds are too airy, too open in some scenarios, and that's creating one issue. But then they overcorrect and close it down too much. It should be fresh air. And again, it's another simple thing to look at. If you go back to last year and you walked into your shed in the middle of February, and the first thing you get is the smell, you have an issue probably.
You've got a problem.
Yeah.
So question coming in there, Pat, about space sheeting. What about it? Is it a role to play, I wonder?
It depends on the space sheeting. No, it's ventilated sheeting or space sheeting.
Yeah, well, they said space sheeting on the question there.
Yeah, so the way you measure it, so we have the inlets on the slide for those who can see the slide. So it's an inlet of 0.08 meters squared. So you go to a bay, 4.8 meters, and you basically measure the gaps. You'll be able to calculate it out, and same for the outlet. So if you look at space sheeting, the traditional space sheeting, the amount of gaps for the amount of sheets is very small. So it probably won't let enough in.
It's about 10%. Yeah, I wouldn't be a mad fan myself with the space sheeting. I find that they often get overgrown on the outside, or there isn't enough, get clogged, and there isn't enough sheeting there or space to let the decent.
So you're talking about Yorkshire boarding better because there's more bigger gaps, and that's when you have two boards either side of the main timber, and the idea there's a lot more inlet to let the air in, and you also, because they're staggered, it prevents a wind blowing through you. It breaks up the air as they come through. Vented sheeting can help, but again, if you look at vented sheeting, independent of height and vented sheeting, it can be the amount of open area and the amount of air to get through can be not as much as you'd expect.
Yeah.
In some of them scenarios, what people will do is they'll push out the bottom of the sheet. So if you angle the bottom of the sheet, so put the cleats to the outside of the girder, and hang the timber on the outside of it, it creates a small bit of a gap at the bottom underneath the sheet to allow air to circulate in, and that can improve it as a quick fix to be able to improve the airflow into the shed, and you'll still have all the benefits of none of the rain or the weather will get in because it's coming underneath the bottom of the sheet.
Yeah, it can work really, really well, that particular one. But I think the inlet then needs to be probably about 5 feet or higher from above ground level.
Yeah, most places have a wall around it, so in most calf sheds it'd be 5-6 foot, so it'd be coming in from underneath that. It's just if you're looking at something you want to change it quick for this year, it's something that relatively straightforward to do, particularly if you're out to weld yourself.
So just to summarise a few of those specs there, Pat, on calf sheds: floor space of around 2 meters, an air space of around 8 cubic meters, an air inlet of 0.08 meters squared per calf, an outlet of 0.04 square meters per calf. And there's one listed there as well, Pat. It's the floor slope of 1 in 20. Maybe just tell us a little bit about that, or why that's important.
Yeah, so nearly anything with concrete, there should always be a slope to get moisture off it. And if you look at the 1 in 20 is nearly the rule of thumb for everything. So it's the same as it's nearly on a cubicle bed, and it's the same as what we use on farm roadways to move. And the reason for that is we're trying to move moisture off where we want it to get it away as quick as possible without the slope being so aggressive that it comes, that you're really walking sideways up the shed.
Okay.
So if you have a very flat floor and the moisture is nowhere to get it, it's very hard to retain a dry bed. So just because you have the floor space, but if the area where the calves are lying is wet, again, we're working against ourselves for the comfort of the calf. And again, it's another area where bacteria and other things can build up. So a fall of 1 in 20 will pull the moisture away, will save the bedding, and will also mean that the calves will stay drier. I think something I would say though, George, is you can create a fall of 1 in 20 handy enough. But if we look at a shed, say again, a 4 or 5 span shed, if you're falling that from front to back, so if you start at the front and you went back the 5 bays at a fall of 1 in 20, first thing you know is the back wall, the concrete, the back wall will be quite high towards the front. And if you were doing that in smaller group pens or whatever all the way along, the calves at the back of the shed will have a great life because they'll be dry the whole time. Where the calves at the front of the shed will be swamped because all the effluent will be running down through each individual pen. Yeah. So ideally we would fall them from left to right. If you take that type of shed again, a 4-bay shed, maybe 30 foot wide, you'd be trying to fall it from left to right or into this, or even if you can, if you had a central passage into the center. Yeah. So you don't want a very long run that it's going, because some calves maybe happen to be in the wrong pen, if you like. And ideally what you try to do is make the channel. So if you get the moisture on a 1 in 20 fall on a relatively short run and into a channel, and let the channel do the work to get the effluent away as quick as you can. And again, there'll be other wins on that as well, because you're getting it's mainly the urine out of the shed as quick as you can. That'll help from the ammonia build up as well. So, and it will also help then from when we go back to talk about your inlets and outlets and keeping the shed fresh.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Pat, just to go back to the ventilation there for 1 second, there's a question came back in again there about space sheeting, and it was in terms of the roof space. Roof sheeting, yeah. Oh,
the roof space sheeting, yeah. Wouldn't be a major fan on the calves just because trying to keep it dry. I think you're far better with a canopy to let it out. Yeah. I think in older cattle and then in slatted houses, no problem. Cubicle sheds, I'm still, some a little bit of moisture down as well, no matter depending on the way the rain is blowing. So yes, it'll help. It does that out, but I think for younger stock, I wouldn't be a major fan, because it's across the whole shed on it, and you can let some rain down in. Okay.
Now, I have seen it done. Where every second sheet is raised, or is it a sheet every?
That's not space sheeting. That's slightly different. Now, space sheeting to me is where there's a gap between every sheet. Yeah.
But the other one will work pretty well.
That's raising individual sheets to create an outlet. Again, the rain and you want to be coming sideways again to that.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll work pretty well usually. Yeah, it might work in a case where there's a very long shed and poor ventilation across the house.
Yeah, so an older shed. So typically calves the old lean-to on a round roof shed. A lot of calves end up there. It can be hard to put a canopy on it, and by their nature they can be, the round roof. And if you start messing with it, so raising sheets within that will help to get the outlet up. But you'd have to raise them across the shed because to get the air movement across the shed.
Yeah. So Pat, then we'll just move on for a minute and we'll come to the last kind of an area. If you're a bit short, you do the sums and your number is, say, 50 and you have 70, or you expect to have 70 by the end of February, what kind of options are available to you to try and overcome that challenge?
Yeah, and again, I suppose come back to it, I think pressure, what we got away with in the past, and I think you've highlighted at the start, we may not get away with going forward because of the calves may stay longer on farm. So long term, just I think to avoid the situation going forward, and I know Martina Gormley, and you've done the figures too, George, like that if calves start with a compact spring calf, and if calves start staying on farm between 4 and 5 weeks, you nearly need space for about, well, minimum 90% of the total calving. So if you have 100 cows calving in a compact spring calving, at a certain point you could nearly have all calves on farm till they start moving off, just because they're staying on farm and they're still calving. So long term, you just need to bear that in mind as well. But in the short term, if you do find yourself that you're a bit short, obviously if you can move the calves and sell them earlier than planned, if you are to get someone to take them, that's very straightforward, simple system. And again, okay, you don't want to be giving away calves around like that, but the hardship may save you, or the pressure it takes off the balance of the calves. It could be worth considering.
Yeah.
The other one then is temporary accommodation. So what we're talking about there is, as time moves by, do other sheds become available? The typical one is a straw shed. If it has a concrete floor on it, can you, one thing, move the straw out and maybe reek it as the weather improves? Or as the shed becomes half full as you're using the straw, is there an option there to put calves in there on a temporary basis till you're able to start selling calves? Just again, them type sheds, you just want, they can be the opposite. They can be quite drafty because they tend to just hold straw. So just watch them that they're, there's not gusts of wind going through them, but you can create a lot of windbreaks and things like that using straw bales to give the calves comfort in them type sheds. And a lot of this could be just 20 or 30 calves, George, and a lot of farms that and you only need space for them for 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, exactly.
To get you, and what they're really doing there, it's taking the pressure off the balance of the calves, and hopefully then we won't have as much problems with our calves.
Yeah.
The other one, some people have looked at
moving them out,
like the silage pits, and putting in them onto what you call them, the huts. Again, you have to be able to manage the effluent. If you are putting them on a silage pit, it ideally works going across the back wall rather than coming down the side of the wall, for the same reason as that the effluent will tend to fall from top to bottom.
Yeah. So
just watch that if you're putting a hutch up on the very top and you're coming down by the length of the wall, that the bottom hutch could take a lot of the effluent. So just be careful of that. Now, them hutches are in short supply and they're quite dear as well. So, but if some people have it, it is an option.
What about putting them
outdoors? The other one is taking this. Sorry, George.
What about putting them outdoors altogether?
Yeah, taking stronger calves into a sheltered field, or creating a sheltered belt in the field by putting bales out in the formation of a cross. So basically, no matter what way the wind is coming, they can go to the right corner, basically. Yeah. Taking a strong, again, it's small numbers moving quick for short space of time. So if the weather's right, you have stronger calves, usually your heifer calves, maybe they can go back onto once a day, fed with a teat feeder out in the field. And with a good sheltered field, could be it's the cheapest solution of them all, George.
Yeah. Okay. And again, it's taking the bigger calf out early as well, which is kind of the one you want to move because they're taking up the most space.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And okay, look, that's great, Pat. If we just have a quick look then, and so what are our take-home messages? They're around assess your requirements now, make alternative arrangements if you see yourself coming short, but clearly do not overstock the existing facility that you have. It's just not worth the risk or the effort. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any last-minute questions for Patrick, now is your time to pop them into the chat function there, the question function there. Otherwise, what we'll do
I think George, sorry, that I suppose to avoid the same question next year again, if you do find yourself in short supply of calf housing, don't let the year go by and be in the same situation again next year. Maybe it's a time to look at creating something or a better system that we're not here talking about the same thing next year.
Okay. Pat, correct me if I'm wrong. The detail is that farm to farm movement of calves from 11 days of age, and for export it's 15. Isn't that? Are they the minimum ages for calves? I think pretty much think that's what it is. Guys and ladies, next week on the Let's Talk Dairy webinar, we're joined by Michelle McGrath, a vet with Animal Health Ireland, to talk about successful weaning of calves. Thanks very much, Patrick, for a very informative chat there on calf accommodation. Bye, everybody.
That's all for this week's bonus episode from the Let's Talk Dairy webinar series, and don't forget to look out for more bonus episodes each week. I'll be back with the usual Dairy Age podcast on Monday, so do listen in then. I'm Stuart Childs, and thanks for listening.